Or Madam Chair. Legislator Plotsky,
Here.
Cunningham, Bergdorf,
Here.
Feeney,
Here.
Kuhn,
Here.
Mayo,
Here.
Peter,
Here.
Ricard,
Present.
and Whalen.
Hi, I'm here.
8 present, Madam Chairwoman.
Great. Thank you, Majority Council. Welcome, everybody. It's the October 28th meeting of the Law Committee. We have a fairly short agenda tonight. Have you had a moment to review the minutes from the last meeting? I'll take that as a yes. Is there a motion to approve
Yes.
the minutes?
Motion.
To accept.
Seconded.
I think that was Legislator Whalen.
Yes.
Thank you. And a second by Mr. Bergdorf.
Yes.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, thank you. Minutes pass unanimously. Our first topic of the evening is item 2, adopting a general fund balance policy for Albany County. And Mr. Riley, did you have a couple words to say about this? Good evening. How are you tonight?
Yeah, Madam Chairwoman, it's good to see everybody. I would actually request that we table this until the next committee meeting. We're kind of going over some fine points with legislative staffers and a couple of the legislators. We want to make sure we get to a common ground where everybody's very comfortable and happy with the policy before we push it in.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Peter.
as I originally asked to table this, I just want to thank Mr. Riley and the executive staff for working with us. I believe we will get to that. So I will follow up on that tabling and make a motion to table that. But again, I want to thank Mr. Riley for his efforts.
Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, before we move on, I would just like to, when we get an amended version of the policy, I would ask that we have an underlined copy so that we could see what changes have been made to the original copy that we are considering at our next meeting.
That sounds like a simple enough request.
Yeah, I can supply that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Riley.
I'll
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Feeney. All in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? No. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Riley, for being
Thank
here.
you.
Our next item 3 is a public hearing on proposed local law I concerning a law to prohibit smoking in common areas of multiple unit dwellings. Legislator Baroro, would you like to speak about this again this evening?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So pretty much this local law is to prevent secondhand smoking and the effect of secondhand smoking. As some of you already know, about 41,000 people die from the impacts of secondhand smoking each year in the United States. And so this is to help prevent that people don't get die from and live with the consequences of secondhand smoke in their homes. And this only pertains to multi-family units. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Madam Chairwoman, may I ask a couple of questions?
Sure. Is that Ms. Whalen?
Yes.
Yes, please
Yes.
go right ahead.
Certainly, I hate smoking and I don't like secondhand smoke risks, to innocent parties, but I just was parsing through the law and I had a few questions about the intent of some of the language. And I noticed specifically in the definitions, and I don't have it in front of me, it mentioned tobacco, and then later on it defined smoking as a litany of items. And I was wondering if it said cigars, cigarettes, tobacco, other combustible items. And I'm not really a real expert on smoking or things that one would smoke, but I'm wondering if this also includes, is marijuana tobacco and that juuling stuff, jewels, those things. I'm not really up on juuling either, but I know that those are health hazards. I don't know if smoke comes out of them, but sometimes I see people on the street puffing on like this jewel device, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden like puffs of things come out. I don't know, but like, what does it, I hate to sound really, I just am not really clear on what your intent is. Is it just cigars, cigarettes, also expand it to jewels, pot? I know we might be legalizing marijuana in the future in New York. I don't think it's legal now, but anyway, so does it include, is marijuana tobacco? If you're smoking marijuana, is that a form of tobacco? And if so, does that come under the tobacco definition? I'm just not sure if the definitions aren't tight enough and might need to be tightened up a little bit. That was my one concern. And then I thought I recalled someone at the public hearing talking about, I thought you were going to change this or take the criminal penalties out of it, possibly. I thought there was some discussion of that, and maybe I was not even looking at the right version, but I think I was, because it was sent for today, October 28th. But I thought we were going to take out criminal penalties and just possibly leave in civil penalties. And then my third question out of 4 is, what is the landlord's liability here, if any, that is imposed? I know, thank goodness, there is nothing imposed directly by this legislation on landlords with respect to enforcement. But I know that, they probably will have some sort of enforcement responsibility if it becomes a law. And so that's kind of sad for landlords who already have, big enough burdens upon them with respect to regulatory schemes in New York. And so I was wondering about all of those things.
So that was definitions, criminal penalties, landlord liability, and did you have a fourth?
Oh boy, the fourth one was, why would we pick 3 or more instead of 4 or more? Because I know that in the landlord tenant law in the state of New York, there are bigger burdens on landlords that have 4 or more units. So I was wondering why we didn't do 4 or more, why we're imposing this on 3. I mean, maybe 2 would be good too. I don't, if you want to protect anybody and everyone from secondhand smoke, then why is 3 the magic number? I just don't know why you chose 3. If it was, out of the lawyers in the counsel's office thought it was a good idea because it comported with some other laws in the state of New York and the landlord tenant scheme. I'm just not sure. And then, yeah, that was the fourth item. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you.
Just to keep things working.
So with the to start with the criminal penalty, there should be no criminal penalty. I think that should have been removed already. So if it is still there, then it's going to be removed. I believe it should be removed already.
Could someone look? Because excuse me, I'm
removed.
sorry to interrupt. I thought I was reading something that was provided to me today. And so I wasn't, just
There is
check.
a version that was pushed to Granicus, and it is in the backup that is, the criminal penalties are cut out they're in the brackets. The bracketed information is the material that's been removed.
Okay. Oh, okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And with regards to definition, so any marijuana, of course, would be considered smoking, and the intent of this is not to, because hopefully marijuana is going to be legalized, and the intent is not to criminalize or to ban people from smoking, but it is to prevent smoking where other people are affected by it. So if smoking in marijuana in a common area would also be considered smoking in a common area, so that would be yes, consider smoking. And what was your third question?
Oh, what about the jewels and those devices? I'm sorry, Madam Chairwoman, may I respond
Yes, please. Yeah, the vaping
Okay.
devices.
Okay. What about, yes, those vaping devices, are they included in this definition as other combustible materials? Is that what vaping means?
Yes. So vaping, e-cigarettes and stuff, menthol, yes.
Okay.
The language-
Do the councils think we should list that more specifically, those items, or no? They feel like the definitions are good?
We did update
Enough.
definitions in the most recent version that was pushed to Granicus, and it does specifically include vaping.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. Okay.
Did I answer all of them already?
We have landlord liability. We have
yes.
3 or more or 4 or more units. There's a list.
Mhm.
Yeah. Landlord liability. So far, what we want to do is not, we don't want law enforcement to like do anything with regards to this legislation, but we want to encourage landlords to enforce it. We want to encourage landlords to say that, or to put it in the lease, which is going to be on what is we are trying to do, what is going to be on the, when you receive the correct version. Is going to, landlords will have to put it in their lease that there's no smoking in common areas. And so we are trying to, as opposed to having a law enforcement and stuff like that, force landlords to enforce this, we want to encourage landlords to actually be the ones to be like, okay, this is something that we are doing for the benefit of everybody to prevent secondhand smoking. So yeah. But
Well,
but
I
yeah,
just-
so there's
See, I have a,
so there's no like liability so far. But what can happen is if people are violating this law, a tenant can call the Department of Health, and the Department of Health can definitely come to that building and inspect. And if there is like so much violation going on, the Department of Health can impose a fine on the landlord,
on the landlord or on the tenant?
on the tenant.
So actually, it's kind of good for the landlord that it takes it out, like they can try by putting a clause in their lease, putting up a sign, making policy. But in a way, it's helpful to the landlord that someone else can come in and tell the tenant how it's going to go down instead of the landlord having to, the landlord can make due diligent attempts to try to get people to conform. But it's actually, now that you're speaking about it, it makes it seem like to me that the landlord would have an easier time with an enforcer behind them to help them with this effort. So that is kind of a good thing for the landlord. I just wouldn't want to have to see a landlord beleaguered with having to really, have to take this battle on by themselves.
Okay.
Correct.
What, and Mr. Barrera, what's the rationale behind the 3 or more versus some other number?
Basically 3 or more is that people are living the 3 units, as when it goes to 3 units, people begin to like live independently of each other, like but 2 units can be considered a multi-unit, but usually a lot of 2 are like the same family. But when it gets to like 3 units, then it gets like complicated, like you can have somebody else renting and stuff like that. I don't know if Rebecca has any more.
What if you have, say, town, like in Colony, where I have my constituents in my district, there are these townhouse developments for 55 and over that are going up in many places, and they're singles, they may share a wall, but they may be not up and down, but across, like 3 and 3, like clustered housing is very popular now in the suburbs. So what concerns me is that if you live in your own townhouse that you buy across from, say, the street from the Colony Town Library, and you pay $400,000 for it, and you share a wall with the guy next door, and then he shares a wall with the guy on the other side of him, and you all have your own patios and your own patch of grass, that means you can't smoke a cigar in your house? This applies to townhouses also?
None of
So
this applies inside the premises. It's the
Yeah.
common areas only. Is that correct, Mr. Barrera?
correct, common areas, correct.
Oh, this isn't inside? This is just
No,
outside?
this is just the common areas. So lobbies, I'm thinking lobbies, laundry rooms,
Mhm.
places
Can I
like
ask a
that.
follow-up question on that, Madam Chair?
Well, I have a couple other people in
That's
line
fine.
as well.
Yeah.
So I guess
it's-
I just want to say in Colony, we've got like these clustered housing townhouses where 55 and older folks, buy a townhouse. And when I was on the Colony Town Council, they would come back and they own outside their back door. They may be connected in like a cluster of 3, but they own their own grass and they own their own area where they can put in like a flagstone patio, because they would come back and they would ask for permission to do that. And so I'm wondering, that's not theoretically then a common area, because
I wouldn't think
even though
so.
it's a townhouse, it's outside your back patio, then you can smoke a
Mhm.
cigar there.
Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't apply to private homes and stuff like that.
Private. Well, it says owners, I think, residential owners. So,
I mean, if it's a multi-unit and you are renting to other people in it, then it will be considered, it will be a multi-family. But if you are just living in your own townhouse, then
Yeah.
it's just your own.
but what if it's connected?
Well, then-
Like that's,
So I think, Mr. Burrow, what you're saying is that this is limited to rental properties and does not concern individually owned premises.
So if it's an individual house and you are renting, so the way the legislation is written is if 3 independent families are living in the same building, then it would be considered a multi-family unit.
okay, so like
3 or
3
more.
townhouses in a row would not be considered.
No.
Okay. But a condominium where it's like a high-rise condo where people own their condos, it would apply, obviously, because there are common areas. Now I
Yes.
understand. Okay.
Okay.
So it could be private, but only in like condo situations where you're in a big building and there are
Yes.
common areas. Like
Yes.
townhouses, probably that wouldn't apply. Even if they stand 3 together in a cluster where they share walls, if there's no common areas, it wouldn't apply. And they can
Correct.
still smoke inside?
So far, yes, they can. So far with this legislation, they can still smoke inside.
So
Even
Ms.
in an
Mata,
apartment building?
I want to be able to come back to you, but we've had a few other people waiting.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Thank you. No, thank you,
I'm gonna-
Madam Chairwoman, for letting me
I-
speak. Thank you.
I'm
Yes,
going to move
thank
on
you
to
very
Mr.
much.
Kuhn, and then we're
Okay.
fine looping back to you in
Okay.
a few minutes.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kuhn,
Thanks. Yeah,
please go ahead.
I just, I think the legislation answers some of the questions that have come up. The common area is defined in legislation to mean a space that the residents of more than one unit are entitled to use. So if it's outdoor space that nobody else, a resident from another unit can't use, then it wouldn't be a common area. And if you want to smoke a cigar or whatever outside, then this wouldn't apply. I did note that it includes grassy or landscaped areas. So if there was I guess I can imagine like an interior courtyard or something like that, that multiple units had access to, that would be a common area, even though it is outside. So
Yes. As long as it is within 50 feet.
I beg your pardon?
So if you're talking about yard and it is within 50 feet from the building, then it is considered a common area. If it is over 50 feet, then you can't smoke.
Right. So it would prohibit smoking in interior courtyards and things like that.
Correct.
And I guess that's intentional. On the marijuana thing, I mean, marijuana is a combustible substance, as all those cool things would be. So I think it would be included within that. And then I was just going to say on the question of the landlords, even though the statute or the bill as written doesn't directly apply to landlords, I guess I would suggest that if you have a landlord that was allowing his tenants to smoke in common areas in violation of the local law, that his other tenants would potentially have a claim against him for violation of quiet enjoyment. Although frankly, I think they would probably have that anyway, even if this local didn't exist, because it's obnoxious to have to walk through, other people's secondhand smoke, leave your house. So I think landlords are always going to have to make sure that, their people aren't smoking in common areas in the apartments anyway, because otherwise they potentially lose out on rent. So that was it. Those are my only observations. I think this is good legislation. I plan to support it. I think it will improve quality of life. So thank you for proposing it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuhn. Mr. Bergdorf?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Baroro and I had an opportunity to talk earlier today, as I did with Majority Council. And my concerns were, I am sympathetically in support of the bill. However, I would like you to take a look and tighten up the language. I understand that Baroro is talking, for the most part, he is focused on 50 feet from the building. But I gave him an example, like in the Towers of Colony, you might have a yard, a landscaped front yard that's 200 feet from the building. And the way the bill is written, you could not smoke a cigar within 200 feet of the building, because that is determined as a common area. So I would like to see some draftsmanship which sort of focuses and narrows the effect of the secondhand smoke to a closer radius to the building. Also, as I'm sure our former Colony Council and Councilwoman know, and I from my previous time in Colony, we have a tremendous amount of townhouse developments, condo developments, where people's decks are within 50 feet of each other. So I could go back on my back deck, which is my property, and under this law, because I'm 50 foot from my neighbor's deck, I could not smoke a cigarette or a cigar on my back deck. And personally, I think that's wrong. I also asked Baroro whether or not people opted into this or it was mandatory, and he told me it would be mandatory. And I know that there are a number of condominium developments that have their own set of rules that apply to smoking and non-smoking. And I think that they do that in such a way to balance the interests and protect residents from secondhand smoke, while also allowing people who do smoke or their guests to smoke in such a way that they do not affect existing tenants. So I am, my heart is with the legislation. I don't smoke. Nobody in my house smokes. Nobody in my car smokes. I guess if somebody wanted to go out on my deck and smoke a cigar, I wouldn't have a problem with that, as long as it wasn't in my house. But I'm afraid that this is drafted in such a way, in such a broad way, that it does not recognize the suburban apartment complex, townhouse complex, or even some of the condominium developments that people have invested their life savings in. And I think we need to be somewhat sympathetic as we go through the second stage of drafting of this, to make sure that we get closer to focusing on that 50-foot and the secondhand smoke, and not the yard that's 150 foot away from the building, or your own deck, which you should have the right of quiet enjoyment of, because that's the consideration that you, those were the limits in which you bought your thing. And Colony is not unusual. Cohoes has that, and Guilderland has that, and the city of Albany has that. And I just don't want to see us write this in a way that we have gone overboard beyond what the real problem is. And Baroro said he would take those matters under consideration, and I am greatly appreciative of that. And I just wanted to highlight that discussion that we had today.
Thanks, Mr. Bergdorf. It does sound like with some focus from the people who are giving input here that we can craft some legislation that will avoid any unintended consequences and still promote the intent behind it. I think Mr. Kuhn had a quick follow-up question.
Yeah.
And we'll need to move on.
I guess to Mr. Bergdorf's point, I do support it. I support, I think, the intent. I do agree, having taken a little bit closer look at section 5, that this does need to be tightened up. Smoking is prohibited in common areas of multiple unit dwellings and within 50 feet of any multiple unit dwelling. That last clause is, I don't think, consistent with the intent and seems to be very, very broad, just pursuant to its actual terms. I mean, it would appear to prohibit, if someone has a dude that is just their own, they could not smoke on it because it's within 50 feet of their own door. So I think that, I don't know if that "and" is supposed to be there or what the intent is, but that section 5 should I think be cleaned up somehow to be consistent with what I believe is the intent of this statute, of this bill. That's
Okay. Yeah, I'm also thinking that multi-unit dwellings are within 50 feet of each other. So where can you smoke? So I think just a little more tightening up and we'll have a stronger piece here. But nonetheless, we have the item before us is whether this goes for a public hearing.
I think Rebecca wanted to say something if she's still here.
It's my understanding that Mr. Efficoro may be interested in tabling the public hearing for this evening to allow more time to tighten up these issues that you've raised tonight so that we can move forward with better and just very good legislation on this point.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Is that a correct understanding, Mr. Barrow?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Peter.
if it is the sponsor's intention, I will make a motion to table this for further consideration.
I don't think we need a motion, do we? He just tables it, right? Ms. Kennedy, do?
No motion is needed if it's tabled by the sponsor themselves.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep. So, all right. Thank you, Mr. Burrow. We will consider item 3 and the local law item 4 as tabled at your request. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. It looks like this will develop in time very nicely.
Thank you.
And the ever patient Ms. Orth, I think, is waiting to speak about item 5 concerning the agreement with the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee.
Yes,
Ms.
ma'am.
Orth, are you still with us?
I'm here. Thank you, madam.
Great. Thank you. How are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thanks.
So the Governor's Traffic Safety Grant is a renewal grant. This is a grant that you have to apply for. There are 2 grant awardees that are given the honor of being picked for this, and the job is to travel around the state and country and learn best practices in traffic safety, DWI safety, states where marijuana is now legalized, what are the implications, and then bring those best practices here to Albany County. Mary Tanner Richter, who is the bureau chief of our vehicle Crimes Unit was once again selected as a governor's traffic safety prosecutor. And these are the funds that support that grant. It supports about 50 to 60% of her salary, as well as 50 to 60% of a salary for an assistant that helps support her and the work and the training that she does.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Worth. Does anyone have any questions about this grant?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Bergdorf.
Yeah, I see this is federal money,
Yes.
so there's no chance of anything being withheld at this point in time.
We have had no information that it is being withheld or reduced. This is the exact same amount that we got last year. And it comes through, the Governor's Traffic Safety Council. So we are assuming it will continue as they've sent out, the award letter through 2021.
All righty. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Is there a motion to approve or any further questions from anyone?
Motion, Madam
Yes.
Chair.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Peter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Feeney on the second.
Second.
I'm sorry, just for the record, who was seconding?
Me, Dennis Feeney.
Thank you, Mr. Feeney. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And one abstain by me. Motion passes with one abstention. All right. Thank you. And we can go on to item 6, also with Ms. Orth, concerning a grant application and an agreement with New York State Office of Victim Services regarding the Victim Assistance Program.
This is the second year of a 5-year grant. This supports and actually allowed us to add 2 new victim advocates into our budget beginning in actually just about a year ago, so October of 2019. We received the award letter, and unlike anything anyone has ever heard of in 2020, there was an increase in this year's grant award of $23,270,000.77. So last year, the award was a little bit lower, and we got the renewal this year again with the additional $20,000. So it's great news, and this is the second year of what we hope to be a 5-year grant. We have heard, we have gotten letters, saying that additional years of grant funding will be contingent on conditional funding, but we do have the current contract for the year that began on December or October 1st.
Very good. Are there any questions? Hearing none. Ms. Whalen was, no? Okay.
No. If there are no other questions, Madam Chairwoman, I'll make a motion.
Great, thank you. I will second.
Second.
All right, Mr. Feeney will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Orth. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. Nice to see you too.
Take care. It looks like that has wrapped up our business for this evening. Is there anything else that we need to address? No. How about a motion?
May I just make one more comment? When they're revamping the legislation on smoking in common areas?
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of the clustered housing where there are over 55 townhouse developments are structured. Just keep this in mind when you're developing your language. They have decks or patios right off of them that are private. But then if you step down on the grass, that's the common area that the homeowners association is responsible for mowing. So that could be, you could have a common area within 1 foot of your own private deck. So I just wanted to mention that or throw that out there. So when you're thinking about revamping the definitions and the 50 feet, keep those types of multi-unit structures in mind. If
I
they
don't
would.
see that Mr. Barrow is still on the call. He must have already dropped off.
Oh, okay. Were the count was Miss Kennedy listening or
Yeah.
the councils?
She's always listening.
Oh,
She's
okay.
right here.
Yes, I know. No, she's amazing. I served with her she was one of our councils when I was a councilwoman in Colony. So I'm sure she knows exactly what housing developments and clustered housing for over 55. I'm kind of speaking about from her work experience in Colony, but those are the types of structures that I have in my district that I just want to be mindful of when I'm looking at that legislation. So, yeah, so thank you again for letting me speak.
Chairwoman.
Okay, great.
Yes,
Mr.
I would
Burgos.
just like to add one clarification. It
Mhm.
has nothing to do with the age, 55 or older. Many of the developments going on in Colony now are attached townhomes, whether they're for 30-year-olds with 2 kids in elementary school and back decks, and the back deck is 25 foot from the neighbor's back deck. So it's not just 55-year-old,
Sure.
senior housing. So I think we've got to recognize the entire housing stock, especially that in the suburbs.
Yes.
Yep. Understood.
Yeah, I stand corrected on that. Certainly more than just the 55 and over townhouse developments. The ones in East Hills are very close together, have common areas. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I think you see where we're coming from. So thank you very much.
Sure. No problem. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Peter. Thank you for seconding. All in favor?